and today he's here in the studio in TheInformer to talk about a new book. Now, he always warned me that it would be important for him to read a book before he wrote one. He just didn't take his own advice. Michael Ray, welcome to the studio.
How are you, George?
I can't believe it. You said to me time and time again, jokingly, I need to read a book before I write one, because I used to say to you, you should write a book. Well, you've done it. You took our advice and you've written a book.
Yes.
And it's called...
Who Knew?
Who Knew?
Let me just get a shameless plug in.
Yeah,
Who Knew? Buy one, so Mum's not the only one with a copy. I would love it.
That's the book, Who Knew? And on the cover is Charlie, his gorgeous daughter. And she looks to be in very, very safe hands. Dad and Charlie, you've been a special item for quite some time.
Yes.
What does she make of this? Have you shown her the photo yet? Have you shown her the book?
Well, George, she not quite celebrity status at school, but she's a little bit worried about it, but we had to get her approval.
Okay. Has she had a chance to read it yet?
Yes, she's actually contributed a couple of pages.
Does it worry you when in the reference guide there's Charlie, 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 and the first thing she's done is go straight to the reference page?
Yes.
To sort out how much she's contributed?
It's funny though, George, that's why I said I spent my whole life being Michael Ray, and now suddenly I'm Charlie's dad.
Yeah.
And it's the same at school. I know everyone's parents as, you know, oh, you're Bob's dad, you're Tracy's mum. No one actually knows anyone's name, so I've officially been relegated to Charlie's dad.
That's it's funny and it's wonderful at the same time. I can remember the great joy I gave my parents the day we launched the SBS World News, which was a lifetime ago, and Mum said to me, Dad didn't move from the TV for the entire time I was on air. And that was the day that I officially went from being George's son, and suddenly Andrew was George's dad. It was that lovely shift. I went from father to son, son to father. It was just it's a transition that everyone should go through, and Charlie's probably luxuriating in it as we speak. But talk to us about the book. You and I have touched on a number of times about we need to change the language, we need to change the perspective if we are going to advance the conversation about equality. And it's a time when we need to talk about it even more than ever before. And over the last week, the last few weeks, we've seen Canberra explode with enormous challenges, and it's to do with language, it's to do with attitude, it's to do with culture. So is the book appealing and touching on some of those subjects, or is it from a completely different take?
No, George, it's about all the things that feed into the outdated gender expectations and roles that we've sleptwalked into.
Language?
And language, where it starts. Just recently, you'll note that Australia's dropped back. I think we dropped nearly to 50th out of 70 countries for gender equality. And I see a lot of the amazing equality advocates advocating for doubling down and being more forceful and more demanding. And that's why I say it is such a righteous and beneficial cause for all of us.
Yeah.
That the data and the benefits are there. They're undeniable for us as a society, but the messaging and the communications around this are failing. They're even counterproductive. Just today I saw a equality post and it had 47 hashtags. In that 47 hashtags, there were 13 that mentioned women, there were 6 that mentioned mum, there was, apart from parenting, not one for fathers.
Not one for fathers.
Not one for fathers or one for men. So until we see equality as a benefit for men, half of them aren't going to get involved. So we've got to sell the benefits to them. And what we do constantly and subconsciously is we keep talking about how men have an advantage because of the patriarchal system. Well, for a lot of men who are bystanders, or even enthusiastic bystanders, going, no, I'm all for equality, but they're still just a bystander. So they need to get involved.
Talk to me how you've used language as a way of showing us a new path.
Well, for some reason, George, parenting seems to be the last bastion of contemporary society that we haven't taken the gendered lens out of. We got rid of chairman and workman and all of the rest of those outdated things. You know, I come from an era where a bloke who was a nurse was still called a male nurse.
Yes.
You know, it was air hostesses, not stewardesses.
They're just a nurse.
Yeah, or
Mind you, Hollywood is still, you know, they talk about actor, you know, and it could be female, but they still have a gong for the best female and the best male.
Yes.
If we talk about equality, it should be the best actor.
Yeah.
And one gong, not two. Is that? Am I playing a card?
No,
that's the Joker.
Yeah, but we don't call them actresses and actors anymore. We call them actors. So
well, if that's the case, then there's only one acting gong, isn't there?
Well, yes, could be, but
could be.
With parenting, we're parents doing parenting. Women don't simply become mothers. We all become parents, and until men are held equally responsible for raising the next generation, we're going to keep perpetuating this outdated gender myth. And it's really funny. That's why I say most of the equality initiatives were conceived in a time when men were either considered unable,
yes,
uninterested, or unsuited,
correct,
or all three to raise children. Right. So they were all about enabling mum to work outside of the home as long as she kept up her caring. They were aimed to facilitate her caring and working. So we've just heaped more pressure on mum.
I noticed that your mantra is one that you've reminded us in the past, and it's if we enable, if we encourage, and if we expect men to be held equally responsible for raising the next generation, then we're on the pathway to going forward and making a difference.
Yes.
Yeah?
And George,
it's the E's.
3 E's.
Enable, encourage, expect.
Yes. Who doesn't love alliteration? It's another fancy word that us authors use.
It's this new author in you.
Yes, that's it, George. We enable first by removing the gendered nature of so many of the quality initiatives.
Correct.
So, primary and secondary caregiver. What's a secondary caregiver, for goodness sake? That's nan, or that's a babysitter. As single parents, we're all considered primary caregivers, whether we're at work or whether we're caregiving.
Yep.
But if you're a partner, somehow it's not until you've earned the money to buy the bread and then taking the bread home and making the sandwich that it's somehow caregiving. That's enabled workplaces to be willfully blind to our main reason why we're actually out working, is to provide for our families. Yeah. So let's scrap that. Yeah. Let's remove maternity care. Let's remove, here in Victoria, our first point of contact for new parents is the Maternal and Child Health Centre.
Right.
Where does that go? I've never been made to feel more like a third wheel at these things, but what it does, and it's not about me as a dad, it's if I'm not enabled to help mum, guess who shoulders the burden or the responsibility of doing it? So there's the enable, get rid of that, put change tables in male toilets. The encourage comes to, at the moment, our role models, our version of a good dad was a good provider.
I can remember the early days when I had taken my daughter into the toilet. I had her there, and she needed to go, and I went through 1,000 different stressful moments, thinking to myself, "Is it going to be clean enough? I'm going to make sure that she's safe," and I didn't let her out of my sight, and we got everything done. But it shouldn't be that stressful. It should be a very natural thing to do.
George,
we've made it very difficult, haven't we?
We went back through and we retrofitted syringe disposals in all toilets, male toilets.
Yep.
But we don't have change tables. So the inference is that either changing nappies is solely the responsibility of a mum, or men are more likely to be a diabetic or a drug user than a father. Yeah. It's just ridiculous. Yeah. The encouragement comes down to showing, let's encourage men and show them what a real good father provides for their children. Yeah. There's so many unique and beneficial outcomes in psychological, social, behavioural, educational outcomes from having an involved present father. So if dad's going to sacrifice some of his income to foster a better relationship and more time with his child, he's going to have a better outcome for his children, and that's what we think we're doing now by working ourselves to death. And then the final one, expect. Yeah. At the moment, I get praised for just, and I love a compliment as much as an ex-bloke. Yep. But when I get praised for just doing the bare minimum, it's ridiculous because it's not expected for a dad. Yeah. So at the moment, 1 in 5 single parent households are dad. So I say to people, look at that. Is there anything unusual? No. Thumb's uncommon, 1 in 5. But at the moment, dads are still seen as unusual, a bit odd, don't quite fit the mould, a bit, well, we need to expect them to do it. So it's a little bit of peer pressure. So when maternity or paternity leave comes up, it's like, no, you're kidding. You're not doing it, rather than good on you for doing it. Like, what a great guy. You know, it needs to be expected of us so that we have that push. So enable, encourage and expect. Buy the book. My mum will love you.
He's getting better at this. His name is Michael Ray. Good guy. More importantly, just realised he's become an author. Thank you, mate.
Thanks so much, George.
Who knew?
Who knew, exactly.